if you witnessed the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct the other day, you would have witnessed absolute peak, as the amount of things that were announced during that Direct was absolutely insane. This was probably one of my most favorite things during that entire Direct.
1080p screen, okay. Well, handheld, of course, 1080p, yeah.
Yes! Yes! It's 120! Yes! Yes! Oh my lord! Yes! 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 Oh my god, it's 120 frames. Let's go. Oh my god. That is huge. Yes, dude. So it's no surprise from my reaction that 120 frames or 120 hertz being on the Nintendo Switch 2, just while even in handheld, is a huge change just for all Nintendo Switch games coming up into the future, and especially the Splatoon series. Now, of course, I made a video about this the other day talking about one of my biggest issues, especially with Splatoon for the last 8 years. We've been dealing with this thing known as input lag, which has basically plagued a lot of Splatoon players from reaching their full potential and actually just playing the game in a comfortable manner, just like any other game that you would find on PC that requires your button inputs to be as precise and as one-to-one as possible. One of my main wishes for the Nintendo Switch 2 that it would be 120 hertz, which yes, it finally is, and I'm so excited for that. And just by that, it can greatly reduce the input delay as long as it's a true 120 frames and not like things like frame generation or anything like that, which I highly doubt that it would be. Now, we do need to have a small talk, and it's going to be regarding previous games on the Nintendo Switch, like Splatoon 3 and Splatoon 2 and all other games and such. But mainly we're going to be talking about Splatoon 3 because it's the main game right now. If you saw the Nintendo Direct, you would have noticed that there was also an extra section talking about certain Nintendo Switch games receiving Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games, which would allow them to do higher frame rates, better resolution, all sorts of stuff, so the games can actually take advantage of the Nintendo Switch 2's hardware. I know a bunch of us were all watching that Direct and we're hoping that our Splatoon 3 will receive a Switch 2 edition for the system. But the thing is, it did not. And I have a couple of reasons for why it probably didn't, and it probably makes sense for why there shouldn't be a Splatoon 3 Switch 2 edition. One of the reasons is that, is it even possible? And well, I'm just going to straight up say, yes, it's 100% possible. However, I believe that there are a couple of factors that make it a little bit more complicated. I actually got a comment on my Twitter post reacting to 120 frames being on the Switch 2. And this specific comment says, is there any technical reason for why 120 frames couldn't be supported in Splatoon 3? And I'm just going to straight up say it because I did respond to this. 100%, yes, it can. However, Splatoon 3 is likely to be hard-coded to 60 frames per second because when it was being developed, it was developed with Switch 1 in mind, even though that specific part doesn't really matter, but this hard-coded part is what you really need to take, I guess, awareness of. I don't know if you guys have noticed when you play something like Salmon Run where things go really, really crazy and you start receiving frame drops. You notice when you lose frames, the entire game slows down. So literally all your actions slow down, like the enemies around you slow down, like absolutely everything. And this is not just something happening specifically to you. This is happening to everyone all at the same time. So I feel like the issue would be if you were to add the Nintendo Switch 2 into the equation as well, knowing with certain games, or a lot of games actually, when one game is coded like this and there's another game that is basically uncapped or much higher frame rate, the game's information might get really glitchy and it probably won't be as compatible, or probably just won't flat out work. The only way I feel like it could work is that if on the Nintendo Switch 1 it wasn't hard-coded to 60, and basically whenever you do or receive frame drops, the game would basically look a lot more choppy. So like whenever you lose frames, it'll be from frame to frame, but the game will run at normal speed at the end of the day. So that's the only way I feel like it could work, because it'll be working like you have two different PCs, one is stronger than the other, but you know, they can both run the game, but one just runs at more frames than the other. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons I feel like Splatoon 3 wouldn't receive a Nintendo Switch 2 edition. Another reason is that would it even be necessary for Splatoon 3 to receive a Nintendo Switch 2 edition? You gotta think about it like this. Of course, Splatoon 3 is an online multiplayer shooter. If there's a Splatoon 3 edition where it has some extra things that you cannot get from the regular edition, let's just say, oh my god, the Switch 2 edition gets third kits or something like that, that's just not going to happen, because then it turns Splatoon 3 into pay to win, especially if there's a really, really good weapon in that specific edition. Splatoon 3 is a whole lot more universal, where if there is one thing that's added to the game, everyone can get it, unless it's like DLC slash amiibo, where it's cosmetic, which it's only cosmetic at that point. You could say the same thing where Splatoon 3 getting a Switch 2 edition of the game, you could get some like cosmetic items and stuff like that. But I'm just saying that's an extremely expensive cosmetic item that you wanted to get, right? Because then you would have to buy the Nintendo Switch 2 just to be able to use that one cosmetic item. That in itself would be the most expensive DLC item in gaming of all time. So in that case, I just don't believe that Splatoon 3 would receive a Switch 2 edition for Nintendo Switch 2 because, of course, probably not compatible, and it probably doesn't need one. So honestly, that would be my reasoning for why Splatoon 3 would not receive a Nintendo Switch 2 edition game, because it's most likely not compatible and it probably doesn't need one in terms of updates or cosmetic stuff in the game. I mean, I think we would all love for that game to have that 120 frame update and some extra features like being able to use Joy-Con as a mouse for the game as well. I mean, of course, that could be something that's planned for the next game too. But the thing is, of course, it can still happen. I'm not saying that it's not impossible. Like, it definitely is possible. Like if you were to ask, okay, can Splatoon 3 run 120 frames? Yeah, 100%. Like, the Nintendo Switch 2 is just by far a much stronger console, or much more capable modern console, compared to the ancient relic that is the Nintendo Switch 1 that we're still currently on. And saying this too, it still could receive these updates. Like, I'm gonna show you just one slide. This is on Nintendo's website where it says free updates for selected Nintendo Switch games. Free updates to improve playability on the Nintendo Switch 2 will be released for selected Nintendo Switch games. By connecting your Nintendo Switch 2 to the internet, you can download free updates to improve resolution, frame rates, or add support for features such as game share in selected games. Contents of free updates differ depending on the game. So as you can see, there's a list of games that are going to receive some free updates if you are playing it on Nintendo Switch 2, and I'm sure this will also change as time goes on. Like games like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, like this game runs awfully on the Nintendo Switch 1, like it drops frames past 30, and it definitely could receive an update where you can play it in 60 or 120. So they're not necessarily adding to the game, but they're improving the performance of this specific game. So it's not entirely impossible that Splatoon 3 could still receive some frame rate updates in the future as well as time goes on. Maybe Mr. Nogami actually does an update so that it can do that. Or maybe they have their full focus ready for the next Splatoon game that's going to be coming out on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now let's rewind a little bit, because you remember at the start of this video, I was talking about, okay, Splatoon 3 and input lag and all that type of jazz. The Nintendo Switch 2 is going to really help the input lag situation, and I'm not even worried for the next Splatoon game that's going to be coming out, because I have the assumption that majority of games that run on the Nintendo Switch 2 natively are going to have the 4K 60 or the 120 hertz 1080p/2K, which that is also available, which I am really excited for. But what about currently? So will Splatoon 3 have input lag on the Nintendo Switch 2? This is something that we don't know yet. However, in terms of how I basically seen the Nintendo Switch and all that type of stuff and felt the input lag situation, the input lag is specifically towards the console, the regular console. The Nintendo Switch 1 is the factor of the input lag situation. It's the main thing that's really causing it. It is not the controller's fault, because like I've said before, connect this to the PC and there's basically a whole lot less input lag compared to everything else when you play it on the Nintendo Switch. So the Switch 2 having so much more processing power and just being a tank in general makes me very confident that there's going to be much less input lag when we are able to play Splatoon 3 on the system. But like I said, we don't know that yet. We have to try it out first. I'll be the first to try it so I can let you guys know if it's worth it, because I also don't know if Switch 1 games on the Nintendo Switch 2 run as a regular Switch 1, like it's emulating it to run just how a Switch 1 would do as well. So we have to check that out first. But in the end of the day, the Nintendo Switch 2, much stronger console, much more powerful, has a much higher frame rate, so you gotta get ready for that. And for the future of the Splatoon series, we can only look up at this point. We can only look up to see that, you know what, we're going to have a much better future. The nature of Splatoon 3 being a quick and twitchy shooter in the gaming space is kind of just you need to have high frame rates to want to play this game the best way possible. So I'm fully confident that the next Splatoon game will feel really good. Let me know you guys' thoughts in the comment section below, how you feel about the Nintendo Switch 2, how you feel about the future of Splatoon, and a bunch of stuff. I think it's only a time to get really excited for what is to come. So I appreciate you all for listening to this video and watching it. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it, and of course, let me know your thoughts. So I appreciate you all. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I shall see you guys in a future video.